In the world of great exploration mysteries, few are as captivating or enduring as the disappearance of Colonel Percy Fawcett in the Amazon jungle in 1925. A decorated British explorer, Fawcett wasn't just any adventurer, he was one of the last of his kind, driven by an intense belief that somewhere deep in the uncharted heart of Brazil lay the ruins of a lost ancient civilization he called the City of Z. This wasn't some wild guess. Fawcett had combed through maps, historical accounts, indigenous stories, and archaeological hints suggesting that advanced societies may have once thrived in places modern science believed were uninhabitable. Determined to prove the skeptics wrong, he set off into the Amazon one final time, accompanied only by his 21-year-old son Jack and Jack's friend, Raleigh Ramel. It was a stripped-down expedition by design. Fawcett believed that smaller groups would draw less attention from potentially hostile tribes and move more efficiently through the dense jungle. Before departing, he sent letters back to Britain stating firmly that no one should come looking for them if they failed to return. It would be the last time anyone heard from them. What followed was one of the most haunting disappearances in exploration history. Fawcett's last known message came from a place he dubbed Dead Horse Camp, where he optimistically reported that all was well and they were heading deeper into the forest. And then nothing. For decades, their fate remained a complete mystery. Did they succumb to disease, starvation, or the countless dangers lurking in the Amazon? Were they killed by a hostile tribe? Or, most tantalizing of all, did they actually find the city and choose to stay hidden from the outside world? The mystery drew in searchers and dreamers alike. Over 100 people reportedly died trying to retrace Fawcett's path, many of them driven by the same obsession with the unknown that led Fawcett into the jungle in the first place. Theories began to multiply like vines in the rainforest. Some claimed the group was killed by tribes who misunderstood their intentions. Others believed they were adopted into an indigenous community and chose never to return. More far-fetched versions included alien abduction, portals to another dimension, or even that Fawcett had gone mad and established a new society in the jungle. What makes the story even more fascinating is that modern science has started to catch up with Fawcett's hunches. While his mythical Z might not exist in the form he imagined, recent discoveries using satellite imagery and LiDAR technology have revealed massive earthworks and road systems buried beneath the rainforest canopy, evidence of large, complex settlements that predate European colonization. In a way, Fawcett wasn't wrong. His conviction that ancient civilizations could flourish in the Amazon, long dismissed by Western academia as fantasy, is now being taken very seriously by archaeologists. His tragic journey wasn't in vain. It helped keep alive the idea that there is always more to discover, even in a world we think we've mapped. Today, Percy Fawcett's story lives on not just in history books, but in films like The Lost City of Z, which dramatizes his final expedition, and in countless documentaries and articles that continue to probe the mystery. Was he a visionary or a man consumed by myth? Perhaps both. What's clear is that his legacy has inspired generations of explorers, scientists, and storytellers to keep asking questions, to keep searching the unknown, and to respect the secrets that still lie buried in the world's last true frontiers. The jungle may have claimed his body, but not his legend. Sean Cole was just 26 when he made the fatal decision to take a swim that would cost him his life. A tech professional living in Darwin, Australia, Sean was invited to a friend's 30th birthday celebration being held at the Mary River Wilderness Retreat, an off-the-grid getaway nestled between Darwin and the edges of Kakadu National Park. With lush landscapes and a rugged charm, the retreat was popular with tourists and locals alike. But its beauty masked a deadly truth. The nearby Mary River is home to one of the densest populations of saltwater crocodiles in the world. Despite this danger, Sean and about 15 others were having a good time, unwinding and celebrating in the Australian outback. On Saturday afternoon, fueled by either adrenaline or alcohol, or maybe both, Sean and another friend decided they were going to swim across the river. Their plan? Prove they could do it. Signs warning about crocodiles were clearly posted along the riverbank, and staff at the retreat had even warned the group to stay out of the water, but those warnings went ignored. Sean wasn't the first to test the river, and others before had made it across unscathed. But what he didn't know was that just weeks earlier, researchers had conducted a survey at the exact same spot. It revealed 4 crocodiles over 13 feet in length, and a dozen more over 10 feet. In short, this was one of the most dangerous places in the world to swim. With their friends cheering them on from the bank and a nearby boat observing from upstream, Sean and his companion jumped in. The river stretched about 180 meters across, and as they kicked their way to the far bank, it looked like their luck might hold. Both men made it safely to the other side, grinning at each other with the thrill of the moment. But then they turned around and began swimming back, and that's when everything went wrong. As the two men began the return journey, the people in the boat noticed something, another shape, trailing behind them in the water. At first, it looked like a third swimmer, but as the sun reflected off the river's surface, it became terrifyingly clear. This was no person. It was the massive, ridged head of a crocodile, bearing down on the swimmers fast. Sean and his friend had no idea the predator was behind them, until their friends began shouting from the riverbank. At first, Sean thought they were joking, but when he saw panic in their faces, he looked back and saw it. Just a few feet away, the enormous crocodile lunged. Before he could react, it struck, sinking its crushing jaws around his chest and dragging him beneath the surface in a brutal death roll. His friend could only watch in horror as the water exploded in thrashing limbs and foam, and then fell still. The river returned to silence. Sean was gone. Emergency services arrived and began a massive search effort. Days passed. Then, tragically, Sean's lifeless body surfaced about 200 meters from where the attack had happened. Nearby, a 15-foot crocodile was found lurking and was shot along with 3 others. Authorities couldn't confirm if it was the exact animal responsible, but it brought some sense of closure to Sean's devastated family. Sean was remembered as the careful one, the last person anyone expected to take such a risk. But in the wilds of Australia, even one mistake can turn fatal. And for Sean Cole, that single swim ended in his terrifying final affliction. It was meant to be the adventure of a lifetime, a dream safari through the breathtaking wilderness of Zambia's Kafue National Park, where the air hums with bird calls and the landscape stretches wide under the African sun. Among the group of tourists was Gail Matson, a 79-year-old woman from Minnesota with a deep love for travel and wildlife. For her, this wasn't just another trip. It was a bucket list moment, a chance to experience elephants in their natural habitat, not behind glass or fences. But what was supposed to be awe-inspiring quickly turned tragic. During a game drive, the group encountered a large bull elephant, and while safari-goers are used to such close encounters, something about this one felt different. The elephant appeared agitated, its movements more deliberate, its posture more tense. Before the driver could reverse or navigate away, blocked by thick brush on both sides, the elephant suddenly charged. The massive animal stormed the vehicle, using its tusks and sheer strength to flip it over like a toy truck. In the chaos that followed, Gail was fatally injured, while 5 others sustained injuries. The footage captured moments before the impact, circulating widely on YouTube and news platforms, shows the elephant approaching steadily as a passenger nervously films the escalating situation. The guide, unable to escape due to terrain and vegetation, had no choice but to shout and brace. The video cuts out before the moment of impact, but the damage was all too real. Park authorities later confirmed the elephant had not shown prior aggressive behavior, calling the attack sudden and unpredictable. The incident ignited global debate about the balance between ecotourism and wildlife safety. While these safaris offer a profound connection to nature, they also carry risks that sometimes, tragically, cannot be controlled. Experts weighed in, noting that elephants, especially lone bulls, can be unpredictable, particularly during musth, a period of heightened testosterone that can fuel aggression. While it is not confirmed if this elephant was in musth, the behavior was erratic and forceful enough to cause alarm. The incident was not just a freak accident. It became a painful reminder that wildlife, no matter how majestic or calm they may seem, are still wild. Friends and family of Gail Matson described her as adventurous, compassionate, and endlessly curious about the world. Her death sparked mourning in her hometown, as well as reflections across the safari tourism industry. It also raised tough questions about whether the guides were properly trained, whether the vehicle was appropriately equipped, and whether park safety protocols were enough. In response, tour operators began reassessing driving routes, guide training, and emergency response tactics. Even veteran rangers acknowledged that nothing in years of experience could always prepare you for a bull elephant with a grudge and a clear path to charge. Yet, amid the sorrow and shock, some found inspiration in Gail's legacy. Her family shared that she would not want fear to stop others from experiencing the world's natural wonders, but she would want everyone to do it smartly, with caution and respect. It is a poignant reminder that the same force of nature we travel so far to admire deserves both our admiration and our understanding. Because when you are in the wild, you are not just a tourist with a camera, you are a guest in someone else's territory. And sometimes the host makes it very clear who is in charge. In 2006, David Sharp, a 34-year-old British climber with a love for mountaineering and a passion for pushing limits, set his sights on summiting Mount Everest, the highest peak in the world. He was not part of a large expedition, nor did he have a team of Sherpas helping him along the way. He chose to climb solo, carrying limited oxygen and minimal gear, hoping to rely on grit and determination rather than luxury and support. David had previously attempted Everest in 2003 but turned back. This time he was determined to reach the top, climbing from the Tibetan side along the notoriously challenging North Face route. Unlike the crowded and commercialized southern route, the northern side is colder, windier, and has fewer climbers around. Sharp did make it to the summit, which is a remarkable achievement, but the mountain does not let anyone off easy. On his descent, he encountered serious problems. Somewhere around 8,500 meters in an area called Green Boots Cave, he stopped to rest. This cave, marked by the body of a long-dead climber wearing neon green boots, is infamous as a landmark on the trail. Unfortunately, David was already severely weakened by the extreme altitude, lack of oxygen, and exposure. He sat down, too exhausted to move, and remained there. Now here is where things get ethically murky. That day, over 40 other climbers passed by David Sharp as he sat there alive but dying. Some thought he was already dead. Others realized he was alive but assumed he was beyond saving or felt they could not help without risking their own lives. One climber, Mark Inglis, a double amputee from New Zealand, later stated that David was non-responsive and that it was too dangerous to attempt a rescue at that altitude. This sparked a firestorm of controversy. The world was shocked that someone could be left to die while so many walked by. Media outlets picked up the story, and it became a global debate about the ethics of extreme mountaineering. Do you push on toward the summit at all costs, or do you turn back and try to save a fellow human being, even if it jeopardizes your own survival? Sir Edmund Hillary, the first man to summit Everest, was openly critical. He said no summit is worth a life, and that something had gone seriously wrong in the climbing culture if people could step over a dying man in pursuit of a goal. Other climbers defended the decisions made that day, arguing that above 8,000 meters, known as the death zone, every step is a struggle, and rescuing someone could be physically impossible. David Sharp's story became more than just another tragedy on Everest. It became a symbol of the fine line between ambition and ethics in the mountains. His death served as a wake-up call to the climbing community. Since then, some changes have been made. Expeditions now often carry more supplemental oxygen, teams are more prepared for emergencies, and climbers are encouraged to make decisions not just based on success, but on safety and morality. Still, Sharp's fate hangs heavy over Everest, like the thin air near its peak. It is a chilling reminder that the mountain is not just a place of dreams and glory, but also of harsh truths and unforgiving consequences. Everest is majestic, but it does not care how strong your will is or how pure your passion. It demands respect, and sometimes even that is not enough. David Sharp's story will always serve as a sobering example of what can happen when human ambition meets the brutal indifference of nature. Just outside of Paris, there's a wildlife park called Tuari, and it's not your typical European zoo. This place goes all out to recreate the full safari experience, offering guided tours in rugged jeeps, luxury chalets with panoramic windows, and even transparent tunnels that let you look predators like lions and leopards right in the eye. But while the park does a lot to keep guests and animals safe, that safety comes with one major condition. You have to follow the rules. Now, this terrifying story centers on a woman we'll call Marie, a 37-year-old who visited the park in late June 2024 with her toddler and her mother. They spent the day exploring the safe areas, sticking to the enclosed tunnels, and enjoying the sights. Marie's little boy loved the reptile house most of all. That night, the family stayed in one of the park's deluxe chalets, which happened to be located inside a zone called the American Exhibit, a massive open forest area modeled after North American wilderness, home to animals like wolves, bears, and lynxes. Here's the catch. That part of the park isn't open for walking. Visitors are supposed to travel only by armored jeeps with a guide, and even chalet guests have guards patrolling around them 24/7. But for reasons we may never fully understand, Marie made a fatal choice the next morning. After waking up and seeing wolves from the safety of her window, she decided to go for a jog. That's right, a jog, through an active predator zone. She left her son with her mother and set off down a path. The wide road eventually narrowed into a trail, clearly marked with multiple warning signs that only trained staff were allowed beyond that point. Whether she didn't see the signs or simply ignored them, Marie kept jogging, headphones in, totally unaware that danger was watching her from both sides. She was so focused that she nearly ran straight into a massive bear. Frozen in shock, she slowly began to back away, only to be ambushed from behind by something far worse. An Arctic wolf lunged at her ankle, trying to yank her down. She screamed and fought back, but seconds later, 2 more wolves, a male and a juvenile, leapt from the trees and joined in the attack. The male wolf lunged onto her back. The young one tore at her arm. The first attacker had dislocated her ankle and nearly ripped her foot clean off, but it was the male, clamping down on her throat, who would do the most damage. Luckily, 2 rangers nearby heard her screams and rushed in, scaring the wolves away just in time. Marie was alive, but barely. Covered in blood, unconscious, and barely breathing, she was rushed to emergency care. Doctors fought to save her, even managing to reattach her foot and stabilize her condition. But after several days in a coma, a severe infection in her leg led to her tragic death just a week later. Now here's where things get messy. Marie's family is suing the zoo, claiming there weren't enough warnings. The zoo insists there were at least 7 signs, but Marie's legal team argues that the signs were small, poorly placed, and lacked obvious danger symbols. In the quiet midday heat of August 28, 2022, a tragic and baffling event unfolded at the Ara Zoo in Ghana. It wasn't a typical Sunday at the zoo with giggling children, wide-eyed visitors feeding goats, or tourists marveling at the rare white lion cubs. Instead, it became the scene of a fatal encounter between man and beast, one that left more questions than answers. A middle-aged man, whose identity was never officially released, somehow managed to breach not just 1, but 2 levels of security, scaling a 10-foot outer fence and then a 20-foot inner wall to get inside the lion enclosure. Why he did it is still a matter of speculation. Some believe he intended to steal the prized white lion cubs, which are extremely rare and valuable on the black market. Others suggest it may have been a dare, a delusion, or even a misguided attempt at a spiritual ritual. Regardless of the motive, one thing is clear. Once he stepped into that enclosure, he stepped far outside the boundaries of safety, both physical and natural. Inside were not just any lions, but a protective lion family. And the male, Melvin, was not having any unexpected visitors that day. Lions are territorial by nature, and even more so when protecting their young. Within moments of the intrusion, the man was attacked. Witnesses reported hearing roaring and commotion before zoo staff rushed to the scene. The aftermath was gruesome, with officials later recovering the man's lifeless body from the enclosure and confirming he had died from severe injuries sustained during the mauling. What shocked many wasn't just the attack itself, but the sheer recklessness of the act. Zoos are designed with multiple layers of security, not just to protect animals from humans, but more importantly, humans from animals. Melvin and his pride didn't escape or break out of their space. They were in their home, doing exactly what nature wired them to do. The Ghana Forestry Commission acted quickly to close the zoo and launch a full investigation, confirming that all animals were secure and that no staff had been at fault. The statement they released also highlighted the need for the public to respect zoo boundaries, reminding people that enclosures are not just walls, but lifelines designed to preserve life on both sides. The tragic incident sparked international headlines and online debate, with many asking how such a security breach was even possible, and whether additional safeguards should be implemented. It also brought renewed attention to the risks faced by both humans and animals when curiosity or poor judgment crosses the line into danger. Melvin the lion didn't choose this. He wasn't a rogue animal or an aggressive beast on the loose. He was simply a protective father responding to a sudden and confusing threat in his space in front of his mate and cubs. Unfortunately, the consequences were fatal for the trespasser and deeply unsettling for the zookeepers and wildlife community who work daily to keep both animals and humans safe. In a way, this incident serves as a grim but important reminder that wild animals, no matter how used to captivity they may seem, still operate by the rules of the wild. There are boundaries for a reason. And when those boundaries are ignored, disrespected, or foolishly crossed, tragedy is often not far behind. The Ara Zoo has since reviewed its protocols, and while the animals remain unharmed, the emotional toll on staff and the public remains very real. Melvin, meanwhile, is still in his enclosure, still a lion, still a father, and still a creature of instinct, unchanged by the headlines, but forever marked by the day a stranger dared to enter his world. Michael Degrui was a man whose passion for the ocean ran as deep as the trenches he explored. A renowned underwater cinematographer, filmmaker, and ocean advocate, Degrui wasn't just a guy behind a camera, he was a force of nature, known for bringing the mysteries of the deep to living rooms around the world. With an infectious energy and a love for storytelling, he transformed the scientific into the spectacular, making marine biology feel like a grand adventure. But in a tragic and unexpected turn, the life of this fearless explorer was cut short, not by the wild, untamed ocean he adored, but by a helicopter crash on a clear afternoon in Australia. On February 4, 2012, Michael Degrui, aged 60, was in New South Wales to begin work on yet another ambitious ocean documentary. He was joined by Australian filmmaker and producer Andrew White, a close collaborator of director James Cameron, and the creative mind behind the film Sanctum. The two were scouting locations for an upcoming deep-sea project, likely filled with the kind of thrilling, visually rich content that had become Degrui's signature. That afternoon, they boarded a Robinson R-44 helicopter at a small airfield near Nora. Shortly after takeoff, the aircraft veered left, lost control, and crashed, bursting into flames. Both men were killed instantly. For someone like Degrui, who had survived shark bites, deep ocean dives, and countless underwater hazards, the idea that his life would end so abruptly on land felt almost surreal. It was a cruel irony that someone who had danced with danger in the most remote corners of the planet would lose his life during what should have been a routine flight. The loss was felt deeply across the scientific and filmmaking communities. Tributes poured in from around the world, remembering not just a brilliant filmmaker, but a man who inspired others to care about the oceans with unmatched enthusiasm. Degrui's work had always gone beyond just capturing beautiful footage. He wanted people to feel something, to connect with the deep sea in ways that sparked curiosity, empathy, and urgency. He was outspoken about protecting marine ecosystems and was especially passionate about the need for sustainable stewardship of the planet's oceans. His TED Talk, delivered just months before his death, echoed that message. We must do better for the oceans, and we must act now. Colleagues often described him as someone who radiated intensity and warmth in equal measure. Whether he was filming rare creatures in pitch-black depths or speaking at conferences with a contagious gleam in his eye, Degrui had a way of making people listen and care. His collaborations with National Geographic, the BBC, and Discovery brought us breathtaking footage from places few had ever seen, and even fewer dared to go. He turned the alien world beneath the waves into something familiar, even magical. His death, alongside Andrew White, was not just the loss of two great storytellers. It was the loss of visionaries. Both men dedicated their lives to exploring and documenting the world in order to better understand and protect it. And though their final journey ended far too soon, their work continues to inspire a new generation of filmmakers, scientists, and dreamers. Michael Degrui once said, "I want people to love the ocean before it's too late." That mission still stands. His legacy lives on in every film, every lecture, every child who now wants to become a marine biologist because of something they saw in one of his documentaries. The deep sea may be a little darker without his light, but his message continues to ripple through the waves and through us. David Jewell was a man of many talents, an entrepreneur, a community leader, and an adrenaline junkie with a deep love for kite surfing. Born in Australia, he later moved to Switzerland, where he spent over a decade building a successful life. He owned multiple eateries in the scenic ski town of Villars-Grillon, including a restaurant, gourmet burger bar, cafe, and deli. His mission was simple: bring the vibrant flavors of Australia to the snowy Swiss Alps. Over the years, David had built a reputation not just as a business owner, but as a trusted member of the local community. People described him as dependable, kind, and always willing to lend a helping hand. But in 2016, David took a well-earned break from his busy life and booked a holiday that promised sun, sea, and adventure. He joined a kite surfing expedition with Offshore Odyssey, a tour operator that specialized in reef-side adventures. The trip was set around New Caledonia, a tropical island territory east of Australia, famous for its rich marine life and secluded beauty. David was excited to spend several days kite surfing over crystal clear waters, surrounded by coral reefs and remote beaches. On one of the first days of the trip, the group anchored their catamaran near the reefs of the northern coast. The sun was shining, the winds were perfect, and the water was glassy. David strapped into his gear and set off across the ocean surface, wind pulling him into long, smooth glides. It was everything he had hoped for, pure freedom, pure joy. But below the serene surface, danger was lurking. A tiger shark had been patrolling the reef edge, searching for prey. These apex predators are common in the region and can grow to over 11 feet in length. As David skimmed along the water, the shark sensed vibrations from his board. Driven by instinct, it moved in closer. When David launched into the air for another trick, he lost control during the landing and crashed into the sea. His kite lines went slack and the kite collapsed into the water. He was now floating, vulnerable. Moments later, the tiger shark struck. It surged upward and clamped its massive jaws around David's right thigh. Witnesses on the catamaran saw the telltale shape of the shark breaching the water, followed by a violent struggle and frothing waves. David screamed, blood pouring into the sea as the shark's serrated teeth tore through flesh and muscle. It released him seconds later and vanished back into the deep. The crew raced to his rescue, pulling David from the water and trying desperately to stop the bleeding. A distress call went out at 3:48 p.m. and help arrived quickly, but David was fading fast. He went into cardiac arrest en route to shore and was pronounced dead just after 5 p.m. He was only 50 years old. David's death was a devastating blow, not just to his family and friends, but to the tight-knit kiteboarding community. It also reignited debate over shark attacks in New Caledonia, which had seen multiple fatal incidents in recent years. Officials eventually closed some beaches and installed controversial underwater nets, measures that sparked backlash from marine biologists and indigenous Kanak leaders alike. For David, a man who embraced life to the fullest, the ocean was a playground. But in the end, it became the setting for a shocking and brutal encounter, his terrifying final affliction. At the Gondwana Game Reserve in South Africa, where luxury meets lion roars and elephant selfies are practically a rite of passage, tragedy and wild unpredictability collided in the most dramatic and heartbreakingly real way. F.C. Conradi, the 39-year-old co-owner, CEO, and unofficial elephant whisperer of the place, met his end not at the hands of poachers or corporate drama, but under the massive feet of one of the very animals he adored. You read that right? Trampled by an elephant. Not in some wild action movie chase scene, but during a seemingly routine morning stroll to gently nudge a herd of elephants away from the posh tourist lodges. You know, just another day at the safari office. Except this time it wasn't. Around 8 a.m. on July 22nd, 2025, as FC tried to move the herd, probably with his signature calm voice and I got this energy, one particularly moody 6-ton bull elephant decided it wasn't in the mood for polite direction. With no warning, it charged. We are talking tusks, feet, full elephant fury, and just like that, the reserve's beloved CEO, a man with degrees in zoology and business, was tragically gone before the morning coffee even kicked in. Rangers on site couldn't do a thing. By the time help arrived, FC had already suffered fatal injuries. It was a shocking blow, not just to the reserve, but to the world of wildlife conservation. This guy wasn't just some rich dude playing safari. He was genuinely passionate about wildlife, conservation, and running one of the swankiest game reserves in the country. The Gondwana team was shattered, releasing a tearjerker tribute that begged the public to let the man's legacy speak louder than the inevitable online rumors and wild theories. What makes this even more mind-boggling is that this wasn't even the first time the elephants at Gondwana had beef with the staff. In March 2024, David Candela, a 36-year-old field guide, was also killed by an elephant while leading a group near the reserve's eco-tent lodge. Same reserve, similar circumstances, eerily familiar outcome. Are the elephants organizing some kind of union or revenge arc? No one knows. But suddenly those peaceful sunrise game drives feel a lot more like episodes of When Nature Attacks. Despite all this, the reserve's management is taking a chill approach. The elephant involved hasn't shown any unusual behavior, so they're keeping him in the reserve for now, monitoring his mood and maybe playing him some calming music or something equally soothing. But the decision not to remove the animal has sparked debates. Was this a freak accident or a predictable tragedy? Should wild animals in conservation parks be treated with kid gloves, or should there be consequences? Meanwhile, visitors are still rolling in, clutching their binoculars a little tighter and double-checking that no elephant is eyeballing them like they just stepped into a scene from Jurassic Park Savannah Edition. FC's story is a potent reminder of the wild in wildlife. These aren't oversized pets. They're 6-ton powerhouses with moods, instincts, and zero chill when provoked. Safaris and close encounters with nature's giants, the truth is that the wild doesn't read the script. One moment it's majestic, next moment it's deadly. So here's to FC Conradi, a man who lived and died by the wild. He wasn't just leading a game reserve, he was part of its rhythm, its danger, its beauty. His death is a sobering chapter in the safari tale book, a reminder that behind every magical elephant photo is a powerful creature that doesn't always play nice. In June 2016, Yellowstone National Park, a place known for its raw, untouched beauty and otherworldly geothermal features, became the backdrop for a heartbreaking and deeply sobering incident. Colin Scott, a 23-year-old from Oregon, and his sister Sable were visiting the Norris Geyser Basin, one of the hottest and most dangerous thermal areas in the entire park. That afternoon, they made a decision that would change everything. They stepped off the designated boardwalk and ventured into the restricted geothermal zone, searching for a natural hot spring to soak in, an illegal and highly discouraged activity known as hot potting. As they wandered more than 200 yards into the basin, Sable recorded their exploration on her phone. The footage would later become part of a National Park Service report, detailing the moments leading up to the tragedy. Colin approached the edge of a hot spring, knelt down, and attempted to test the water temperature, but the fragile, unstable crust of the ground gave way beneath him. In an instant, he fell into a pool of boiling, acidic water. The temperature in these springs can reach over 200 degrees Fahrenheit, and many are extremely acidic due to the high concentrations of sulfur and other minerals. What might look like calm, steaming water on the surface is, in reality, a deadly mix of scalding temperatures and chemical activity. Rangers were called immediately, and they arrived at the scene later that day. They were able to briefly spot Colin's remains, his head and upper torso, in the pool, but worsening weather conditions, including lightning storms, forced them to abandon the recovery effort that evening. By the time they returned the next day, there was nothing left to recover. The heat and acidity of the spring had completely dissolved his body overnight. Only Colin's wallet and a pair of flip-flops remained on the edge of the spring, serving as haunting reminders of what had happened. The tragedy of Colin Scott is not just a shocking tale. It is a grim reminder of the hidden dangers that lie beneath Yellowstone's scenic surface. Since the late 1800s, more than 20 people have died from thermal-related incidents in the park, often due to similar decisions to leave marked paths or ignore warning signs. The park staff repeatedly stresses that the boardwalks and trails are not there to restrict exploration. They exist because the landscape is unpredictable and deadly. What may appear to be solid ground can actually be a thin crust covering scalding acidic water just inches below. Colin's death sparked national conversations about park safety, visitor education, and the need for more awareness about the risks of geothermal areas. Park rangers continually work to prevent these types of tragedies, but they also face the reality that many visitors underestimate the danger or overestimate their own understanding of the environment. In this case, the desire for a unique experience, a private soak in a natural spring, came at the highest possible cost. At its core, this story is not about recklessness, but about how quickly a series of seemingly small decisions can lead to irreversible consequences. Yellowstone is a place of wonder, but it demands respect. Its geothermal features are some of the most volatile and dangerous on Earth, and they do not allow second chances. Colin Scott's story is a painful lesson, one that underscores the importance of listening to warnings, respecting nature's power, and understanding that not all beauty is meant to be touched. This next story is equal parts tragic, shocking, and if we're being honest, completely avoidable. Meet Prahlad Gujar, a 38-year-old maintenance worker from Rajasthan. A lovable guy with zero ambition and a whole lot of charm, Prahlad was the kind of dude who always chose parties over responsibilities. Everyone knew him as the fun guy, the life of every get-together, and that's exactly what led to the worst decision of his life. In February 2024, Prahlad was supposed to attend his niece's wedding down south. Instead, he lied to his family, claiming he couldn't get the time off work. The truth? He did get the week off. He just didn't feel like dealing with a week of awkward family small talk and ceremonies. So he spent that time partying non-stop with his buddies. For 5 straight days, they drank, wandered around local hangouts, crashed wherever they could, and basically relived their college years. But by Saturday morning, Prold was the last man standing. His friends had all tapped out, hungover, or passed out. Not ready to stop the party, he went bar-hopping solo, building a solid buzz before lunch. At some point, he made his way to the Sri Venetasara Zoological Park, a family-friendly zoo known for keeping intoxicated visitors out. Somehow the ticket booth worker didn't clock his drunken state, and Prold slipped through the gates without issue. At first, he wandered the usual paths, unimpressed by the monkeys and deer. Then he moved on to the predators. Still bored, he decided to snap a few selfies in front of the lion enclosure, and that's when security noticed something was off. A guard named Sanji, who'd dealt with his fair share of unruly visitors, knew trouble when he saw it. He warned Prold to back off from the fence, clearly marked with signs telling guests to stay at least 8 feet away. But Prold wasn't done. Just behind the main lion exhibit was a quieter off-limits area meant for new arrivals or sick animals, a place clearly marked as restricted. Prold waited for the guard to get distracted, then darted down the path. He climbed a water tank overlooking the holding area, and below him, a massive male lion and 2 lionesses. With a drunken laugh and his phone raised high, Prold jumped. Yes, jumped 12 feet straight into the enclosure. The lions were startled at first, especially the male who snapped instinctively at Prold's shoulder. It wasn't a full bite, but it was enough to make Prold panic. Screaming in pain, he tried to run, even making it to a nearby tree, but he didn't get far. The lion caught him by the ankle and dragged him back like a rag doll. Prold didn't stand a chance. The lion pounced again, this time biting down on his neck. The break was instant. Death came before suffocation or blood loss. What's even more unsettling, the lions didn't eat him. They just played with him. For 2 hours, zookeepers watched in horror as the lions pawed at his body like it was a toy, scattering his remains across the enclosure. When staff finally lured the lions away with food, the damage was brutal. The coroner had to collect fragments of Prold's body from an 8-foot radius. The zoo later confirmed that the lion wasn't unusually aggressive, just doing what a predator does when something falls into its territory. The lion wasn't punished, just relocated for observation. In fact, zoo officials say he'll soon be returned to his main enclosure. Prold's death wasn't a tragedy of nature, it was a tragedy of human stupidity. And hopefully, no one else will be foolish enough to repeat his final, fatal mistake. In the summer of 2002, Prague Zoo became the site of a grim and cautionary tale when 35-year-old Joseph Dominik made a decision that would cost him his life. Late one night, after the zoo had closed its gates to the public and the animals had settled into their nighttime routines, Dominik managed to breach the secure perimeter of the tiger enclosure. According to reports at the time, he had been drinking, and though the exact motivation remains unknown, he allegedly wanted to pet the tigers, a baffling and fatal miscalculation. Climbing over the safety barriers and fences that clearly marked the restricted area, he entered a space occupied by one of nature's most powerful predators. Tigers are not just big striped cats, they are apex hunters, territorial by nature and not remotely domesticated. When Dominik stepped into their enclosure, the animals reacted as any wild tiger might. They saw an intruder, not a visitor. What followed was as tragic as it was preventable. His body was discovered the next morning, mauled and lifeless, the scene confirming what everyone feared. It was not a zoo error, not a security flaw, and certainly not a random accident. This was a direct consequence of ignoring clearly posted warnings and common sense. The zoo, understandably, was shaken. Not only did the incident spark public alarm, but it also raised the dreaded question of whether the tiger or tigers should be euthanized. Thankfully, authorities and zoo officials agreed that the animals had done nothing wrong. They were simply reacting on instinct, protecting their territory from what they perceived as a threat. No disciplinary action was taken against the animals. The enclosure had been secure, the signage was in place, and the zoo had followed every safety regulation required. The truth was hard to escape. This was not a case of animal aggression, but human recklessness. The tragedy served as a painful reminder that wild animals, no matter how long they've lived in captivity, are still wild. They are not pets, not playthings, and certainly not creatures to be approached in their own space for thrill or curiosity. In the days that followed, the story made headlines across Europe. Some mourned the loss, others debated how such an incident could even happen in a modern zoo. And while public opinion was split, some blaming the zoo, others blaming the man, it was clear to most observers that this was a sobering example of what happens when boundaries between humans and wild animals are ignored. Josef Dominik's death wasn't just a tragic event, it became a stark warning etched into the history of the Prague Zoo. And while it would be easy to paint this as a bizarre or even foolish decision made under the influence, the more important takeaway lies in respecting nature's boundaries. Zoos are places of education and conservation, but they are not playgrounds. The animals inside are not characters from cartoon or selfie props. They're living beings with instincts that don't switch off because a human walks in with good intentions. Ultimately, the Josef Dominik case reminds us of the fragile line between fascination and danger. It's one thing to admire tigers from a safe distance, to marvel at their beauty and strength. It's another thing entirely to step into their domain uninvited. And unfortunately for Josef, that distinction was learned too late. If you've ever felt claustrophobic in an elevator or stuck in a crowded subway, that's just a tiny glimpse of what John Edward Jones went through in one of the most haunting caving accidents in modern history. It was Thanksgiving week 2009 when 26-year-old John, an ambitious medical student, devoted husband and father to a 1-year-old daughter, decided to go on a caving trip with family and friends in Utah. Their destination was Nutty Putty Cave, a notorious spot for thrill-seeking adventurers, known just as much for its winding, twisty passages as it was for its history of trapping unprepared explorers. John had caved before and was familiar with the risks, but nothing could have prepared him or anyone else for what was about to happen that night. Nutty Putty Cave isn't your average walk-in cave. It's a labyrinth of narrow crawl spaces and tight squeezes, some with names like the Birth Canal and the Big Slide. At around 8 p.m. on November 24th, John entered what he believed to be a familiar section. But in a tragic mistake, he veered into an uncharted, nearly vertical crevice that dropped down at a sharp angle. Crawling in head first, he quickly realized it was a dead end, but not before becoming stuck. Not just wedged in a tight spot stuck. We're talking upside down, body folded, chest compressed, legs dangling behind him, stuck inside a fissure barely 10 inches wide and 18 inches high. From there, the nightmare began. John was pinned 100 feet below the surface and at least 400 feet from the cave entrance. Rescuers were called in almost immediately. Over 130 volunteers and emergency personnel arrived, working in rotating shifts to reach him. They brought him food, water, and even tried to boost his morale. His voice reportedly remained calm and hopeful for much of the ordeal, even managing to talk to his wife via phone line. Rescuers used pulleys, harnesses, and drills to try and pull him free, but the cave fought back. At one point, John was actually moved slightly, just inches, but then disaster struck. A pulley system failed, and he slipped even deeper into the crevice, his position becoming even more dire. As the hours dragged on, John's upside-down posture caused his blood to pool in his upper body, compressing his organs and making breathing increasingly difficult. Despite the heroic efforts of rescue teams, some of whom risked their lives trying to reach him, it became clear that he couldn't be freed without extreme danger to everyone involved. After 27 grueling hours, John fell unconscious and passed away shortly after, likely from cardiac arrest brought on by his position and internal pressure. It was a devastating end to what began as a joyful family outing. In the aftermath, the decision was made not to recover John's body due to the risks involved. Instead, Nutty Putty Cave was sealed permanently, filled with concrete and left as both a tomb and a somber memorial. His death led to widespread changes in cave safety policies across the country. Rescue teams reevaluated protocols, and amateur cavers became far more cautious. John's story spread around the world, not just as a cautionary tale, but as a testament to human fragility, bravery, and the limits of rescue. To this day, the entrance to Nutty Putty Cave remains sealed, marked only with a plaque bearing John's name. His story is a powerful reminder that even the most experienced adventurers can be caught off guard, and sometimes nature doesn't give second chances. Our next story is a chilling mystery that took place off the coast of Mexico in December 2023. 3 people were attacked in the span of just 2 weeks. But here's the twist. No one is 100% sure what creature was responsible. It started with 26-year-old Maria Jimenez. She was enjoying a swim with friends and family when she was suddenly attacked and killed in the water. Witnesses confirmed it was a shark, but the species couldn't be identified. Just a few days later, less than half a kilometer away, 2 more people were attacked near the resort town of Zihuatanejo. Naturally, most people assumed the same shark was behind all 3 incidents, but the truth might be far stranger than anyone expected. The first of those 2 new attacks happened when a young woman was wading in the shallows. One minute she was relaxing, then, in a flash, she was screaming in agony. Blood filled the water as fellow tourists rushed to pull her to safety. Her injuries were so brutal that doctors considered amputating her leg, though they managed to save it. Now here's where things get weird. When the woman regained consciousness, she insisted it wasn't a shark. She never saw the creature, but said it felt like being hit by jagged living rock. Not the rough, but rubbery skin of a shark. Her hands were covered in cuts from grabbing at something sharp and scaled, like the armored hide of a crocodile. The medical team treating her agreed. The bite pattern and the brutal tears in her flesh were more consistent with a crocodile attack than a shark's. And as rare as it is, crocodiles can end up in the ocean, especially during rainy seasons or after storms. There's even a species in that region called Morales crocodiles that have adapted to saltwater living. They're smaller than their freshwater cousins, but they're faster, stronger, and just as deadly. Now fast forward to December 14th. Despite the 2 earlier attacks, the beach wasn't closed. The latest victim was 75-year-old Belgian tourist Joseph Binance. It was late morning, and most beachgoers had already headed for shade, except for Joseph, who was enjoying a peaceful swim. Nearby on the shore, a family was filming their toddler playing at the water's edge. That's when Joseph suddenly cried out. He'd been bitten, hard, on the leg. The impact pulled him briefly underwater, but he managed to resurface, screaming for help. The moment was caught on camera. At first, people thought he was drowning, but as they ran toward the water, Joseph was yanked under again. This time, the ocean turned red. It was clear this wasn't just a swim gone wrong, it was a full-blown attack. As the rescuers approached, the creature let go and disappeared. Joseph was pulled to shore, but the damage was catastrophic. His right leg was nearly torn off, and tragically, it was too late. He'd lost so much blood that nothing could be done. The whole thing, from the first bite to the moment he was laid out on the sand, lasted under a minute. Joseph's death shook the community, especially since there's still no clear answer as to what killed him. The most likely culprit? A crocodile, over 3 meters long, lurking in salt water, something that doesn't usually happen but absolutely can. Sharks tend to return to hunting spots. Crocodiles? They move on. Whatever it was, it hasn't struck again, but it's still out there somewhere, silent, camouflaged, and waiting for its next victim. In January 2017, a tragic and widely publicized incident unfolded at the Yungar Wildlife Park, more commonly known as Ningbo Zoo, in China's Zhejiang province. A middle-aged man, later identified as Mr. Zhang, attempted to bypass the zoo's entrance fee by scaling a 3-meter wall with the intention of sneaking into the park. What began as a misguided effort to save money quickly turned into a horrifying and fatal mistake. After climbing over the first wall and slipping past further barriers, Zhang ended up inside the tiger enclosure, home to several adult Bengal tigers. Within moments of entering, he was spotted by the animals who, confused and curious, approached him. At first, onlookers and his own family, who had entered the park legally and were completely unaware of his plan, watched in shock as the tigers surrounded him. The situation escalated rapidly as one tiger lunged, clamping down on Zhang's neck and dragging him across the enclosure. Zoo staff responded with urgency, attempting to scare the animals away using firecrackers and water hoses, but the tiger refused to release its grip. In front of stunned visitors, including Zhang's wife and children, the attack continued until police were called in, and one of the tigers was shot and killed in an effort to rescue him. Zhang was eventually retrieved and rushed to a nearby hospital, but the injuries were far too severe and he was pronounced dead shortly after. The story made headlines across China and beyond, prompting an outpouring of public reaction that ranged from sorrow to outrage. Many criticized the zoo for what they saw as inadequate security, claiming the outer wall was too easy to scale. Others condemned Zhang's recklessness, pointing out that signs had been clearly posted warning of the dangers and marking the area as a restricted zone. Online discussions reflected a broader debate, with some mourning the loss of human life, while others were deeply saddened by the death of the tiger, which had only acted on instinct within its territory. The incident also revived memories of similar attacks, including the notorious Battling Wildlife World incident just a year prior, where a woman was mauled after stepping out of her vehicle inside a tiger safari zone. In both cases, a combination of human error and underestimation of animal behavior had led to devastating consequences. Zhang's story stands as a somber reminder that wild animals, even those kept in enclosures, are not and will never be tame. A tiger's instinct is to investigate, stalk, and if provoked or simply confused, strike. These animals are not villains. They are apex predators responding to unfamiliar stimuli in their domain. While zoos can and should uphold the highest safety standards, the responsibility also lies with visitors to respect boundaries, both literal and ethical. In the end, a father's decision to cut corners cost him his life, traumatized his family, and resulted in the unnecessary death of a captive tiger. No amount of cost saving was worth the price that was ultimately paid. The Ningbo Zoo incident continues to be cited in safety discussions, animal rights debates, and risk management courses, not just as a news story, but as a haunting case study of what can happen when caution is ignored and nature is underestimated.